clear to the point. That's what I appreciate about Congressman Katko. So thank you, sir. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me okay? So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here, and thank you, Robert. Robert and I, when we served in Congress together, had our lockers next to each other in the men's locker room, so we saw each other every morning, bright and early, right? So, well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I'm glad to be able to join you here today as lead Republican on the Committee on Homeland Security. Hey, guys, keep it down. Just tell them to keep it down. Thank you. On the Committee on Homeland Security, where we focus on efforts on transnational threats to Homeland, including those which we are discussing today, like transnational criminal organizations, adversarial foreign investment, and persistent foreign geopolitical threats. And I'm excited for the panel which will follow these remarks, which is hosting thought leaders on these issues. I'm looking forward to learning from them, and it's been a long-standing view of mine that economic security is Homeland Security. Let me repeat that. Economic security is Homeland Security, and I think that's very important for what we're talking about today, because the threat landscape has changed dramatically. This conversation is an opportunity to help explain why that I view economic security, why it matters in relation to Homeland Security, and how the U.S. government can better encounter and curb these threats to create an environment which fosters continued U.S. competitiveness abroad. We are at a tipping point in the history of the American Homeland Security. The Homeland has never been more vulnerable to foreign influence and nation-state actors than it is today. Over the course of the preceding decades, the U.S. government has adjusted its intelligence and security focus towards physical security threats, like terrorism, foreign military growth, and weapons of mass destruction. It's perfectly understandable given the threat landscape of the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And during that time period, I was a federal organized crime prosecutor for 20 years before coming to Congress. And I dealt with all manner of crime and all manners of transnational criminal organizations. And so I know full well this landscape. A few specific issues which come to mind are cyber threats, foreign economic exploitation, foreign adversarial investment, and the continued pursuit of transnational criminal organizations like those that are metastasizing on the southern border right now. Think about it. On the southern border right now, we are enriching transnational criminal organizations in a manner we never have before. Every single person that crosses our southern border has to pay at least $4,000 before they come across into our country. That's what the cartels charge. On any given month over the last year, those transnational criminal organizations are netting anywhere from $750 million a month to $1 billion a month. That is a threat landscape that's going to change and become more potent going forward. The big four nation states are only getting more sophisticated as hybrid threats redefine the attack surface through the convergence of information technology, disinformation, and geopolitical fragility. We have seen this new reality play out close to home. This year, across the Western Hemisphere, developing countries have struggled to clutch onto democratic governance amidst economic and political influence from foreign actors. Our global interconnectedness has created new and potentially catastrophic domestic resilience vulnerabilities. Economic security and homeland security are inexorably linked due to the critical role that supply chain resilience plays in our homeland security mission. But where these vulnerabilities lie also exist, I believe, opportunities. Opportunities to reach beyond our own borders and build up global resilience to bad actors. The United States' long and enduring alliance with Australia is an example of an international democratic nexus that can be leveraged against modern threats to homeland security. The question remains, however, as to how we manage these threats in the face of increasing intimidation efforts by China. As they continue their economic buildup and coercive statecraft, human rights violations which are abhorrent, and IP theft and cyber warfare, how do we stand up to China over the next 50 years as it continues to amass power in the global community? How? And I think that's why we're here. This is an enormous question and one that demonstrates the need for a whole-of-nation recognition that to compete with China and emerge victorious, we must have clear-eyed focus on the challenges we face during every conversation about both the security and prosperity of our nation. There are three elements, I believe, we can use to frame these conversations, and I call them the 3 C's. They're called counter, curb, and compete. Now let's talk about counter. How do we counter China? We must impose costs on China to deter and disincentivize actions by them and other foreign adversaries globally. These may include prohibiting key exports from leaving our shores, holding accountable China's nationals violating our laws, and taking reciprocal action in response to cyber incursions and theft of intellectual property and data. Think about what China has done this year in the United States alone with the cyber attacks. And what have we done in response? Curb, that's number 2. In the United States, we must educate state and local municipalities about the nature and extent of the threats they face from China's partnerships, financial transactions, or business acquisitions. There's not a college out there that doesn't at least think about partnering with China when China comes knocking and offering a college you may be struggling a little bit financially, saying, hey, I can give you $20, $40, $50 million from my Confucius Institute. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart, and we must remember that. There must be more robust dialogue with business leaders about the impacts of doing business in and with China. And most importantly, we need to recognize that the decisions we make now will have outsized impacts down the line. China is playing the long game, and we must focus on long-term results as well. We in the United States do not always do well playing the long game. We need to do that. The last time we really did it effectively was how we dealt with Russia post-World War II. Compete. Ultimately, this isn't a binary challenge. There is no home and away game anymore. If we intend to challenge Chinese actions, we need to recognize the tactics they employ internationally will ultimately affect the U.S. domestically. We need to work with partners and allies around the world to determine how we are going to convince entities and nations that it's not in their interest to work with China on foreign investment, supply chain diversity, ICT technology proliferation, data security, and a multitude of other areas. Most of all, we need to provide viable alternatives and competitive solutions in the face of cheap and heavily subsidized Chinese goods and services. Counterfeiting and copyright infringement are perhaps the most obvious form of cheating in the global market. Entities that participate in these activities distort the true market cost of innovation, research and development, and bringing a product to the consumer. By short-circuiting this natural business cycle, culpable entities lower startup and production costs and eliminate for themselves the most expensive element of any business, which is the sunken cost of innovation. China just steals it from us, and we let them do it. Innovation historically has been what sets America apart, and it is the quality that has allowed us to lead in so many sectors. If we are to continue to succeed and win the global market, it is vital that we protect the costliest and most valuable element of our country's enterprises. The past year has shown this to be true in ways that we have never thought possible, as evidenced first by the COVID-19 pandemic, and now because of the crush of goods wallowing off our shores that was created by supply chain technologies. I'm a little bit heartened by things I've spoken to with business leaders recently, telling me that the great economic advantage that they once had by having goods and component parts produced halfway around the world and shipped to the United States is kind of dissipating because of the cost of the supply chain now. And that may change this dynamic in and of itself. But I'd like to share with you some of my thoughts on both the current state of play and the challenges we face going forward. In moving forward with the future of the Homeland Security Department, which I oversee every day, Homeland Security is a unique agency, and much of its success is rooted in strong and impactful public-private partnerships. Nowhere is this truer than in the enforcement of laws related to trademark and intellectual property. The need for strong democratic partnerships will only grow as we face increased competition and challenging diplomatic conditions within our largest trading partner, China. It is incumbent upon us to be clear-eyed about the realities we face and candid with one another about the solutions we must enact. By countering the PRC and other countries' efforts to exploit free markets, the U.S. government and partners can strengthen collaboration within these countries, protect sensitive information, and enable the success of other countries' fair investments. These counter efforts are straightforward, but do require democratic world powers to work in unison to achieve the best results. I know that's very difficult when it comes to China, but we must do it. Leading practices include ensuring foreign investment is diversified and derived from like-minded allies, to include the continued identification, analysis and mitigation of critical technology or resources dependent on China. We must also examine the several key trends that have emerged from China's investments, including increased ownership of transit and shipping lanes by China's state-owned enterprises, proliferation of China's state-owned enterprise surveillances and facial recognition technologies, ICT investments enabling cyber exploitation, and increasing supply chain dependencies through investments in critical manufacturing, raw materials, and chemical precursors. I thank you again and look forward to discussing these solutions with you going forward. But I do want to say, I do think the market will help with some of this as the costs in the supply chain skyrocket for shipping. That may have a very big impact on this, but make no mistake about it. China does not act the way we act and what the others in the free world act when it comes to business. And we must understand that, we must embrace that concept, and we must figure out how to deal with it. And these great people over here are going to talk to you more about that going forward. So thank you very much, folks, and have a good afternoon. See you, buddy. We'll stay in touch, right?